All good for our business chat this morning. Michael Karanja is all about power this morning. How will Kengen get to the 5,000 megawatts? He talks to the managing director now on Business Chat.
Well, thank you very much, Sophia, for that. Yes, and it's all about 5,000 megawatts. We've seen the government issue a target which it hopes to have attained by 2017 of 5,000 megawatts. And one of the companies at the center of this is the Kenya Electricity Generating Company. And I'm now joined by the CEO and Managing Director of Kengen, Albert Mugo. Albert, just to start us off, let's start from where we are currently. What's our current installed capacity, and is the 5,000 megawatts target too ambitious?
Thank you, Michael. The current installed capacity in Kenya today is about 1,800 megawatts. And the 5,000 megawatts plus target that the government set last year is meant to really cope with the rising demand that is expected in the nation as the economy grows. Yes, it's a very ambitious target, considering that it's more than 3 times what was the installed capacity by last year when that target was being set. However, the industry, the power sector is working hard to meet this target, and Kengen is part of the team that is working to meet that target.
Obviously, you're not working in isolation, but Kengen has over the years, you have a mix from hydro to geothermal to even diesel. But even that, given that mix, where do you see us attaining that 5,000 megawatts from? Is it more of hydro, or are we just going to focus on geothermal and more renewable energy?
Okay, in the past, when you look at the generation mix, hydro has taken the giant share. As a matter of fact, there was a time the country had more than 80% being hydro. But more recently, by last year, hydro was contributing about 65% on the generation mix. And then that was followed by thermal with another maybe 25%, and the balance came from geothermal. Now, when you look at the mix in the 5,000 plus megawatts target in the 40 months, we see nothing coming from hydro, because we have exploited most of the economic hydro in the country. But now we are looking at other sources, particularly geothermal, which is a natural resource and which is available in large quantities in the Rift Valley. So in the 5,000 plus megawatt program, geothermal is contributing about 1,700 megawatts. We then have liquefied natural gas contributing about 1,000 megawatts, and there is quite a big part of that equation that is coming from coal at about 2,000 megawatts. Yes.
Just looking at Kengen, we've seen you more or less in the geothermal space. Obviously, you've had great success in doing that. What's your capacity for geothermal currently?
Okay, Michael, currently geothermal stands at about 390 megawatts. That's what we have. And of course, there is more geothermal that's been developed by private sector. There is a private company that has got geothermal in our carrier at a little more than 100 megawatts. So in total, geothermal is contributing close to 500 megawatts as of now. Yes.
And what's your target for geothermal? Because we've seen it is expensive, I'm assuming, compared to the other generation mix. But what's your target for geothermal, and how important is it to this whole matrix of giving Kenya steady and reliable energy?
Michael, as a matter of fact, geothermal is not the most expensive source of energy in Kenya. When we do the planning for the expansion of the power system, we will say that geothermal is the least cost source of energy right now in Kenya. Yes, it is expensive in terms of the capital cost that we put into geothermal. By the time you've done the drilling of the wells, you procure the power equipment, it is expensive at start. But when you look at the running cost, it's very, very cheap to run. So looking at the levelized cost over the period that the geothermal plant will run, it then provides the least cost amount of power to this nation.
Does it have a shelf life?
Like any equipment or machine that runs. Geothermal has a economic life of about 30 years.
Yeah.
However, from our experience, we installed the very first geothermal unit in 1981, 15 megawatts at our carrier, and that plant has been running very well, and up to now it is running. So it's already done more than 30 years,
Yeah.
and we are in the process of refurbishing that so that it can give us more life.
And is there a fear, like, just out of curiosity, is there a fear that perhaps we can overexploit geothermal, or is it something that is in steady supply and is just going to be there for us to tap into and fit into our generation mix?
Okay, sometimes people fear that geothermal may be overexploited, but from the work that we've done in our carrier,
Yeah.
we have scientists who have carried out a lot of studies in our carrier, and we have what you call a reservoir, because where we get steam to run the turbines
Yeah.
is in an area down anywhere between 1,500 meters to as deep as 5,000 meters. So the initial wells that we drilled for Carrier 1 were drilled at 1,200 meters.
Yeah.
By the time we were putting in Carrier 2 in 2003, we had drilled wells to a depth of about 2,200 meters. Currently, we are drilling wells to a depth of 3,000 meters,
Yeah.
and we are even gone to 3,600 meters. And what we are doing is to get down there and reach the reservoir where there is that steam,
Yeah.
because steam is formed when water goes down and percolates through the rocks, and it's heated by the heat of the earth, and we are able to tap where that steam is and bring it up. Now, in order to sustain geothermal, what we are doing is, after we generate electricity and the steam turns into water, we are able to re-inject that water back to the ground, and with time, that water will be heated up again by the heat of the earth and will come back as steam. So with that kind of cycle, geothermal is actually known as a renewable source of energy, and it can be sustained over a very long time.
All right. This Friday, Kengen is launching another 140 megawatts of geothermal onto the national grid.
Yes.
How does this fit in the end game of the power bills that I get each month from one of your partners, Kenya Power and Lighting Company?
Okay, Michael, as I said,
Yeah.
geothermal is the least cost source of power in Kenya right now.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, the first unit of this 140 megawatts was connected to the grid in mid-June. And in July, we connected another 70 megawatts. So we have 140 megawatts in Carrier 4.
All right.
And because this geothermal power, which, as I explained, is least cost, has gone to displace power that's generated from diesel plant. And if you look at the electricity bills that were sent to the customers in the month of July,
Yeah.
The fuel cost charge was at 7 shillings and 22 cents per kilowatt hour. If you look at the bills that were sent out in September this year, after those two units had been running for slightly over a month, the bill had come down to 5 shillings and 39 cents.
Per kilowatt hour.
And because we also added another 70 megawatts unit at Carrier 1 in the month of September, the bills that have now been sent out in October, the fuel cost charge has come down to 4 shillings and 79 cents. So we're already seeing the effect of that geothermal coming in and displacing the expensive diesel power that really is about 5 times the cost of what geothermal is.
And do you foresee a situation where perhaps we can eliminate all those thermal sources and just have renewable and hydros just in that mix, so that at the end of the day, we don't want to be finding bills in excess of 4,000 or 5,000 for small households?
Okay, Mike, what happens world over when you are doing power systems is to find that you look for an optimal generation mix, because we appreciate understandably that, yes, thermal is expensive, but you can't do away with it altogether, because there are times when you will need it. For example, if you look at the way our load profile is, we have what you call the peak demand in the evenings, between 6:30 to 8 in the evenings, when the power that the customers demand goes to about 20 times more than what you would have found during the day. Now, at that kind of period, you find that you need the type of generation that will run for a very short of time. So in the general equation, we expect to see hydro, a lot of geothermal, but you still need a bit of thermal that you need to use for those few hours. So you can't do away completely with it. You need it there, particularly when you also consider that there are times in Kenya we have very serious drought, and the hydro capacity reduces to as low as below half the capacity. At such moments, you need the thermal to pick up as an emergency source for that short period. So you can't do away with it completely, but you can reduce its usage, and certainly the times of the day that you're using it. Perhaps instead of using it for as long as 12 hours, you can bring its usage to about 2 to 3 hours during the peak period.
So it's all about getting an optimal mix. Yes. But just looking at the demand and supply of energy, it's something most people in many industries have complained about, is that Kenya energy costs are a bit high, but we can obviously see that efforts are being made for it to come down. How about the supply side of it, where demand is met by steady supply? How then do we fix that?
What we are doing, and as a sector we are working together. Of course, the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum is leading the team that is working in the energy sector. The generators, which is Kengen, and some private companies are working very hard to give sufficient capacity, the generation aspect of it. Now, on the side of supply, we have the Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, which basically ensures that the power that is generated in the various centers is transmitted to the load centers, many of the cities, and where that power is consumed by industry, by domestic, by commercial premises. And once they transmit the power, then the Kenya Power and Lighting Company picks it up so that it can distribute to the customers. Now, I'm aware that in the recent past, Kenya Power has had a very aggressive program to fix those areas of the network that have been weak and have been causing erratic supply to the consumers. They've been going to various towns and shutting down the power for the entire day with a lot of teams to work on the network. And from the reports that we've received when we meet as a team at the Ministry of Energy, we understand that that has a very positive result.
Yeah. Yes. Just going forward, I read somewhere that Kengen is looking to partner in terms of meeting some of these demands, because to an extent it's a bit capital intensive. So have you engaged any willing partners in terms of joint ventures, and how else are you looking to raise funds to fund the kind of drive for more sustainable power?
Michael, the power generation is a very capital intensive venture, and traditionally Kengen has borrowed money particularly from the development financial institutions, and then put in equity in order to build up the power plants. And as we continue, particularly in this ambitious program that we are doing with government, you find that a balance sheet is not able to accommodate all the debt that is required to develop these power plants. So we've come up with a strategy of offering some of the projects that we are developing to private sector who we can partner with. And as a start, we have gone out requesting for expressions of interest for those who would want to develop our power project with us. And one of the next projects we're developing in Okaria, which we call Okaria 6, 140 megawatts, we have already received interest from some farms. We are currently in the process of acquiring a transaction advisor who would help us in the negotiations and in setting up terms for this joint venture. So that is a strategy that we see being in place and helping us in developing most of the power plants that will be developing in future.
And will that help accelerate perhaps your 400 megawatts target by 2017 or 2016?
Yes, it will. As a matter of fact, after this 140 megawatts, which is being commissioned this Friday, we expect to commission the next 140 by December this year.
Yeah.
And from there, we have a target to put another more than 500 megawatts of geothermal. And 3/4 of that will be financed through this joint venture partnership that we are getting into.
All right. Yeah. I was reading somewhere, Kengen is even thinking outside the box, and you're even offering to give power at preferential rates to people at what you're terming an industrial park in Olkaria. What's the thinking behind that industrial park at Olkaria, and have you received any interest in that kind of line of thinking?
Okay, the thinking behind the industrial park is this, Michael, that if you look at what we are doing in Olkaria, we have a lot of land where we drill the wells and we gather the steam, we take it to the power plants. In addition to that, we have steam coming out of the ground at temperatures of between 250 to 300 degrees centigrade. And we then separate steam from water, and the water we cool it down and re-inject it into the wells. Now when you look at that, there's a lot of energy that can be extracted from the water that we've separated from the steam. So one of the ideas that we have is to get industries which require heat in their processes. For example, the paper industry, the textile industry. And when they are near the geothermal wells, we're able then to provide that heat at a cost, of course, and they can make use of it, because currently, if you go to any process industry, that
to do the whole process themselves
has to be obtained using diesel, which is very expensive. So if they can use geothermal energy, which is available freely from the ground, then that's a big advantage. Secondly, if you look at industry, what industry looks for is very stable and reliable power. Now, most of the interruptions that industry gets in power come from the network, not actually from generation, because generation may be okay, but if, for example, a vehicle knocks a power line, or there is rain and storms and the wind knock down the power lines, then the industry gets disrupted. So if you have an industry very close to where power is generated, then that industry will enjoy very stable power. In addition to that, in the regulatory framework, we are also developing a situation where a power generator can sell power directly to an industry. In which case, then, if you have these industries next where the power plant is, it is possible for us to sell power directly to them at a cost slightly lower than what they would get if that power went through transmission lines, distribution lines, and there are those add-on costs for transmission and distribution. So they will have cheaper power, they will have steam, they will have reliable power. Those are the three main factors that have caused us to think of this idea.
Obviously, well intended, but have you received any interest in that kind of...
Yes, we have already received an interest from a company that is in the paper industry, and we are in discussions with them. And if all goes well, probably in the first quarter of next year, we could see them moving to the Olkaria area to set up a factory there. In addition, there is a textile company from Hong Kong that visited Olkaria with the minister, with the cabinet secretary for energy and petroleum, and the cabinet secretary for industrialization and enterprise development. A company that I understand produces almost 40% of textiles in the world, and they're very interested after they looked at Olkaria and so what we can provide. They're very keen, and government is already talking to them to see if they can come and set base in Olkaria.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much, Albert Mugo. That has been Albert Mugo, MD and CEO of Kengen, just telling us about power and its uses, and that the 5,000 megawatt project is not that highly ambitious.